The evening sky turned a deep orange as the sun began to set behind the city buildings. Tom Wilson walked with heavy steps toward the small bakery on the corner of Pine Street. His shoulders slumped from the weight of another long day working back-to-back shifts at the local factory. At 38, the lines on his face told a story of both joy and hardship. 2 years had passed since he lost his wife Lisa to cancer, leaving him to raise their daughter Penny alone. The bell above the bakery door jingled as Tom pushed it open, the warm smell of fresh bread wrapping around him like a comforting blanket. He had promised Penny, now 10 years old, that he would bring home her favorite honey rolls. She was staying with Mrs. Chen, their elderly but energetic neighbor who watched her after school while Tom worked his evening shifts. Just in time, smiled Betty, the friendly middle-aged woman behind the counter. Almost closing up for today. Tom nodded gratefully and started looking at the nearly empty display case. That's when he heard them, small, nervous voices near the other end of the counter where Frank, the owner, was tallying the day's sales. "Please, sir, we can pay you tomorrow, we promise." Tom turned to see 2 identical little girls, probably around 7 or 8 years old. They wore clean but well-worn clothes, their matching dark pigtails tied with faded ribbon. One clutched a small cloth bag while the other held her sister's hand tightly. There was something in their eyes that Tom recognized immediately, worry that belonged on an adult's face, not a child's. Frank, a large man with a thick mustache, shook his head firmly. "No money, no bread. That's how a business works. I've heard the pay tomorrow story too many times." The girls looked at each other, and Tom noticed their thin frames, the way their coats seemed a size too big. The taller one, maybe older by a few minutes, spoke again. "Our mom is sick. She couldn't go to work this week. We haven't eaten since breakfast and there's nothing left at home." Frank's expression softened slightly, but he shook his head again. "I'm sorry, but I can't." Tom stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. In those little girls, he saw his own daughter, the same vulnerability, the same innocence. But there was something else, too. In their determined little faces, he saw the same quiet strength he'd discovered in himself after Lisa died, when getting out of bed each morning felt impossible. But Penny needed breakfast and a packed lunch for school. The girls turned to leave, the smaller one wiping her eyes with the back of her hand while her sister whispered something comforting. Tom felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't experienced in months. Before he knew what he was doing, he stepped forward. "Wait," he called, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. The twins turned, their identical brown eyes wide with surprise. Tom moved toward the counter. "Frank, I'd like 2 loaves of wheat bread, please." Then, turning to the girls, he added, "Which one were you hoping to get?" The sisters looked at each other in confusion before the one holding the bag spoke softly. "The wheat bread is cheapest. That's what we came for." Tom nodded, turning back to Frank. "Make that 3 loaves of wheat bread. And maybe—" He glanced at the nearly empty pastry section. "Those chocolate muffins and a bottle of milk, too." Frank bagged the items without comment, though his eyes held a hint of approval. Tom paid quickly, ignoring the voice in his head reminding him about the electric bill that was already late. When Frank handed over the bags, Tom turned to the girls who were watching in astonishment. "Here you go," he said, offering them 2 bread loaves and the bag containing the muffins and milk. The sisters hesitated, exchanging glances again. The taller one spoke up. "Thank you, sir, but our mom says we shouldn't take things from strangers." Tom felt a rush of respect for their mother, teaching caution even in difficult times. "Your mom is very wise," he said, kneeling down to their level. "My name is Tom. I have a daughter about your age. She's waiting for me to bring her these honey rolls." He gestured to his own small bag. "I'm Alice," said the taller twin. "This is my sister Amy. We're 8. "Nice to meet you both," Tom replied with a gentle smile. "It's getting dark. Where do you live? Is it far?" "On Maple Street," Amy answered. "Just past the laundromat." Tom nodded, knowing the area. It wasn't the best neighborhood, but not the worst either. Working-class families, much like his own situation. "That's about 6 blocks from here." "Are you walking home alone?" Alice nodded. "Mom is too sick to come. She has a bad cough and fever." The thought of these small children walking alone in the growing darkness bothered Tom deeply. "I'm heading that direction anyway," he said, which wasn't entirely true. "Would it be okay if I walked with you?" "Just to make sure you get home safely." The girls looked uncertain again. Alice whispered something to Amy, who nodded slowly. We can walk on the other side of the street, Alice suggested carefully. And you can just watch to make sure we get inside our building. Tom's heart ached at their caution. Necessary but sad for children so young. That's very smart, he agreed. Let's do that. As they left the bakery, the street lamps were beginning to flicker on. The autumn air had grown chilly, and Tom noticed Amy pulling her thin jacket tighter around herself. He kept his promise, walking on the opposite side of the street, occasionally catching their glances to make sure he was still there. They walked mostly in silence, though Tom could hear their quiet chatter across the street. Once, Amy stumbled on an uneven section of sidewalk, and he had to fight the urge to rush over and help her up. Alice was already there, helping her sister, checking her knee quickly before they continued. At the corner of Elm and Maple, they waited for the light to change. Tom crossed over to their side, maintaining a respectful distance. Your mom must be worried, he said gently. It's getting late, Alice nodded. She told us not to go, but we didn't want to tell her there's no food left. She already feels bad about being sick. Tom recognized that feeling too, the weight of responsibility, of not being enough. Sometimes parents need help too, he said quietly. There's nothing wrong with that. They turned onto Maple Street, and soon the girls pointed to a worn but tidy apartment building. That's where we live, Amy said. On the second floor. Tom nodded, stopping at the building entrance. I'll wait here until you're safely inside, he promised. The girls hesitated again. Alice looked at Tom with eyes that seemed much older than 8. Would you like to meet our mom? I think she'd want to thank you. The invitation surprised Tom. He checked his watch. Mrs. Chen was expecting him by 7, and it was already 1:45. But something about these girls and their situation tugged at him. He thought about what he would want if Penny was hungry and he was too sick to help. If your mom feels up to it, he agreed. They led him up a narrow staircase to apartment 2C. Alice knocked in a special pattern. 2 quick knocks, pause, 3 more. So Mom knows it's us, she explained. The door opened slowly to reveal a thin woman with the same dark eyes as her daughters. Her face was pale, with feverish spots of color on her cheeks. She wore a bathrobe tied tightly at the waist, and Tom could hear her wheezing slightly as she breathed. Girls, you're late, I was worried. Her eyes widened when she noticed Tom standing behind them. Despite her obvious weakness, she immediately stepped forward, placing herself between her daughters and the stranger. Mom, this is Tom, Alice explained quickly. He bought us bread at the bakery when Mr. Frank wouldn't let us pay tomorrow, and he walked us home. The woman's suspicious expression softened slightly, but her protective stance remained. Thank you for helping my daughters, but you didn't have to do that. Tom shook his head. It was no trouble. I'm a parent too. I understand tough times. She studied his face for a moment, seeming to find something there she recognized. Finally, she extended her hand. I'm Grace. Thank you for making sure they got home safely. As they shook hands, Tom noticed how warm her skin felt. The fever was definitely high. He also saw the apartment behind her, clean and organized, but sparse. A stack of papers on a small table caught his eye. Medical bills, past due notices. He recognized them because similar envelopes sat on his own kitchen counter. Are you getting any help for that cough? He asked carefully. Grace shook her head slightly. Just over-the-counter medicine. It'll pass. Her eyes dared him to pity her. Tom recognized that pride too. How many times had he refused help after Lisa died? How much harder had that made things for both him and Penny? He nodded, respecting her dignity. Well, I should get going. My daughter's waiting. He turned to the twins, who were already unpacking the bread and muffins on their small kitchen counter. It was nice to meet you, Alice and Amy. As he turned to leave, Tom realized he'd just encountered a family facing challenges much like his own. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. A recognition that perhaps in helping others, he might find a way forward for himself too. Tom stood in the hallway outside apartment 2C, his hand still warm from Grace's feverish grip. He had already said his goodbyes, but something kept his feet rooted to the spot. Through the partially open door, he could see Amy carefully pouring milk into 3 chipped mugs, while Alice cut the bread into neat slices. His mind flashed to his own daughter Penny, who would be wondering where he was by now. He pulled out his phone and dialed Mrs. Chen's number. Mrs. Chen, it's Tom. I'm running a bit late. Is it okay if Penny stays a little longer? Of course, Tom, the elderly woman replied. We're playing checkers. She's winning as usual. Take your time. Tom thanked her and hung up, then took a deep breath before knocking gently on the door again. Grace opened it wider, surprise evident in her flushed face. I thought you left, she said, trying to suppress a cough. Tom shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I was thinking, have you seen a doctor for that cough? Grace's expression hardened slightly. I told you it'll pass. I don't mean to overstep, Tom said quickly. It's just my wife had pneumonia once. It sounded a lot like that. At the mention of pneumonia, a flash of worry crossed Grace's face before she masked it. The clinic has a 2-week waiting list, she said finally. By then I'll either be better or... She didn't finish the sentence, but Tom understood. Some people couldn't afford the luxury of proper medical care. There's a walk-in clinic on 4th Street, Tom said, the one by the community center. They see patients regardless of insurance status. I took Penny there when she broke her arm last year. Grace leaned against the doorframe, and Tom could see how the simple act of standing was draining her energy. Inside the apartment, the twins were setting their small table, carefully placing a chocolate muffin on each plate like it was a gourmet dessert. Mom, come eat something, Alice called. Mr. Tom got us chocolate muffins, too. Grace gave a tired smile. I'll be right there, sweetie. She turned back to Tom. Thank you again for helping the girls. I told them not to go out, but they're stubborn. They worry too much. They love you, Tom said simply. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he added, Listen, I know we just met, but I have an idea. I need to pick up my daughter, but I could come back afterward with some dinner for all of us. There's a good chicken soup place on my way home. Grace immediately began shaking her head. That's too much. You've already been so kind. It's not charity, Tom said quickly, recognizing the pride in her eyes. The same pride that had made him refuse help from Lisa's friends after the funeral. Actually, it would help me out. I was planning to cook tonight, but I'm beat after working double shifts. Grabbing takeout would be easier, and restaurants always give too much food. It would just go to waste otherwise. He saw Grace weighing his words, probably knowing they weren't entirely true but appreciating the way he'd framed the offer. From inside the apartment, Amy called out again. Mom, you need to eat something before taking more medicine. Grace sighed, then nodded slowly. Okay, but just this once. Tom smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. Great, I'll be back in about an hour. Chicken soup okay for everyone? Grace nodded again. The girls love soup. Me too, said Tom. See you soon. As Tom hurried down the stairs and back onto Maple Street, his steps felt lighter than they had in months. He thought about what he'd just done. Committed to spending money he didn't really have to help strangers. But somehow it felt right. He picked up Penny from Mrs. Chen's apartment, his daughter's face lighting up when she saw the honey rolls he'd remembered despite everything else. How was your day, Dad? Penny asked as they walked hand in hand toward their small apartment 3 blocks away. Interesting, Tom replied truthfully. I met some people who might become new friends. 2 twin girls about your age. Penny's eyes widened with interest. Really, what are their names? Alice and Amy, Tom said. Their mom is sick, so I thought we might bring them some soup for dinner. Would that be okay with you? Penny considered this for a moment. Since losing her mother, she'd become more thoughtful, sometimes seeming older than her 10 years. Is their mom going to be okay? Tom squeezed her hand. I hope so. She just needs medicine and rest. Like when Mom was sick? Penny asked quietly. Tom's heart squeezed painfully in his chest. No, honey. Not like Mom. More like when you had that bad cold last winter. The kind that gets better. Penny nodded solemnly. Then we should definitely bring them soup. Mom always said soup fixes almost everything. She did say that, Tom agreed, smiling at the memory. So you're okay with changing our plans tonight? Yes, Penny said firmly. They need help and we can help them. Tom felt a surge of pride for his daughter's compassionate heart. After dropping off their things at their apartment and freshening up quickly, they walked to May's Kitchen, a small Chinese restaurant known for its delicious soups. We need enough for 5 people, Tom told the young man at the counter. Your best chicken soup and maybe some spring rolls, too. While they waited for their order, Tom noticed Penny staring thoughtfully at a display of fortune cookies. What are you thinking about, kiddo? He asked. Penny looked up at him. Do you think Alice and Amy miss having a dad like I miss having a mom? The question caught Tom off guard. I don't know. I didn't ask about their dad. Why do you think that? Penny shrugged. Just wondering. Sometimes at school when we make Father's Day cards, some kids have to make them for their uncles or grandpas instead. Mrs. Wilson says families come in all different shapes. Mrs. Wilson is right, Tom agreed. And whatever shape their family is, it's full of love. I could see that right away. Their food arrived in a large bag, steam escaping from the containers. The rich smell of chicken broth and spices filled the air around them. Tom paid, wincing inwardly at the cost but pushing away the worry. The electric company would just have to wait another week. When they arrived back at Grace's apartment building, Tom felt a sudden nervousness. What if Grace had changed her mind? What if she thought he was overstepping? Ready? He asked Penny. She nodded, her ponytail bouncing. I hope they like spring rolls. They climbed the stairs to apartment 2C and Tom knocked, 2 quick knocks, paused, 3 more. He hadn't planned to use the girl's special pattern, but it had stuck in his mind. The door opened to reveal Alice, her eyes widening at the sight of Penny. Hi, Tom said. We brought soup. This is my daughter, Penny. Alice smiled shyly. Hi, Penny, I'm Alice. She opened the door wider. Mom, they're here. The small apartment felt warmer now, a lamp casting a golden glow over the modest living room. Amy was setting out bowls on the table while Grace, still in her robe but with her hair neatly combed, sat on the couch. You really came back, Grace said, sounding surprised despite their earlier conversation. I promised soup, Tom replied, holding up the bag. And Penny was excited to meet everyone. Amy approached cautiously, studying Penny. You look like our age, but taller. I'm 10, Penny said. How old are you? 8, the twins answered in unison, then giggled. The ice broken, the children began chatting while Tom unpacked the food. He noticed Grace watching him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and caution. The soup smells amazing, she admitted. I haven't had much of an appetite, but this might tempt me. Lisa, my wife, always said maize soup could cure anything, Tom said, ladling the fragrant broth into bowls. I'm not sure about that, but it definitely helps. As they gathered around the small table, Tom felt a strange sense of rightness. For months after Lisa died, he and Penny had eaten most meals in near silence, the empty chair a constant reminder of their loss. But tonight, with the twins' chatter and Grace's occasional gentle reminders about table manners, the meal felt almost normal. So you work double shifts? Grace asked as the children compared notes about their teachers. Tom nodded. At the factory on Henderson Street. It's not ideal, but the overtime helps. I clean offices, Grace said. Or I did before this cough started. 3 buildings. Evenings usually. Mrs. Baker at the placement agency has been understanding, but I'm sure she's already looking for my replacement. That's tough, Tom said, understanding the precarious nature of hourly work. No sick leave? Grace gave a small, humorless laugh. Not in my line of work. After dinner, while the girls showed Penny their modest collection of books and toys, Tom helped Grace clean up. He noticed her struggling to catch her breath after just the short walk from the table to the sink. You really should see a doctor, he said quietly, taking the dishes from her hands. That 4th Street clinic I mentioned. They're open until 9 most nights. Grace looked about to refuse again, then glanced toward the girls. I can't leave them alone. I could stay, Tom offered immediately, then added, or Penny and I could take them to our place for a bit. It's not far. Grace studied him, and Tom realized how strange his offer must sound. They'd only met hours ago. Why are you helping us? She finally asked. Most people would have just walked away at the bakery. Tom thought about it, rinsing a bowl slowly. When Lisa, my wife, first got sick, we had a lot of help. Friends, family, neighbors. But after the funeral, people drifted back to their lives. I was too proud to ask for help even when I needed it. He looked up at her. I guess I recognized something familiar today. And maybe helping you and the girls helps me too, somehow. Grace's expression softened. I understand that, she said quietly. After Joe left, the girl's father, I wouldn't accept help from anyone. Thought I had to prove I could do it all alone. How's that working out? Tom asked with a small smile. Grace laughed, then coughed. About as well as you'd expect. By the time the dishes were done, Tom had convinced Grace to go to the clinic. The girls can come to our place. Penny has been wanting a reason to show someone her rock collection anyway. Are you sure? Grace asked, looking torn between concern for her daughters and the knowledge that she Needed medical attention. Positive, Tom said. We'll leave the address and my phone number. You can call any time to check on them. As the twins gathered their pajamas and toothbrushes for their impromptu sleepover, Tom realized he'd made a decision that went far beyond buying bread or bringing soup. He was choosing to be involved, to care, to help shoulder someone else's burden. For the first time since Lisa's death, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The girls settled into Tom and Penny's apartment with surprising ease. After initial shyness, Penny proudly showed Alice and Amy her bedroom with its sky-blue walls and glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to the ceiling. Dad put those up, Penny explained, pointing to the constellation patterns. He knows all their names, too. Tom smiled from the doorway, watching as the twins gazed up in wonder. Their small apartment wasn't fancy, a two-bedroom unit in a building only slightly better than Grace's, but he and Penny had worked hard to make it feel like home after Lisa passed. You can both sleep in here tonight, Penny announced generously. I have a sleeping bag and Dad can bring in the air mattress. Where will you sleep? Alice asked, concerned. With Dad, Penny said simply. We do that sometimes when I have bad dreams. Tom felt a lump form in his throat. Those nights had grown less frequent, but in the months after Lisa's death, they'd been a regular occurrence. He'd often woken to find Penny standing beside his bed, tears streaming down her face, asking if she could stay with him. While the girls settled in, Tom checked his phone repeatedly, waiting for word from Grace. Finally, around 9 o'clock, a text arrived. At clinic now. Doctor says likely pneumonia. Getting chest x-ray and antibiotics. Might be a while longer. Tom texted back reassuringly, then prepared the girls for bed. As he tucked them in, Amy asked the question he'd been dreading. Is our mom going to be okay? Tom sat on the edge of Penny's bed. Yes, she is. The doctors are giving her medicine to fight the infection in her lungs. She needs rest and antibiotics, but she'll get better. Promise? Alice pressed, her eyes wide in the dim light from the hallway. Tom hesitated. After Lisa's illness, he'd grown cautious about making promises about health. The doctor thinks so, and doctors know a lot about helping sick people get better. This seemed to satisfy the twins, who snuggled deeper under the covers. Penny, curled up in her sleeping bag between the bed and air mattress, reached out to pat Amy's hand. My dad makes the best pancakes when people don't feel good, she said confidently. He can make some for your mom tomorrow. Tom smiled at his daughter's certainty. That's a great idea, Penny. Now time for sleep. It's been a big day. After the girls fell asleep, Tom sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, bills spread out before him. The electric notice glared up at him. Final warning before disconnection. His paycheck wouldn't arrive until Friday, 3 days away. The soup and extra groceries he'd bought had further strained his already tight budget. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Somehow he'd figure it out. He always did. Around midnight, another text from Grace arrived. They're admitting me overnight. Low oxygen levels. Girls okay? Tom quickly responded, girls are fine. All asleep. Don't worry about anything except getting better. He added his address again in case she needed it and told her to text any time. Then, almost as an afterthought, he wrote, Is there anything you need from your apartment for tomorrow? I could pick it up before work. Grace's response came quickly. My work uniform. Blue shirt and black pants in bedroom closet. Keys are in my purse by the door. Thank you. Tom set his alarm 30 minutes earlier than usual, knowing he'd need the extra time. Then he stretched out on the couch, pulling a blanket over himself. Despite the financial worries and the unexpected turn his day had taken, he felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in a long time, he'd stepped outside his own struggles to help someone else. It felt good, right somehow. Morning arrived too quickly, with Penny being the first awake. She tiptoed into the living room and poked her father gently. Dad? She whispered. Is it pancake day? Tom groaned, then smiled at his daughter's eager face. I guess it is. But we need to be quiet. The twins are still sleeping. They weren't, though. Moments later, Alice and Amy appeared in the doorway, hair mussed from sleep but eyes alert. Is our mom back yet? Alice asked immediately. Tom sat up, inviting all three girls to join him on the couch. Your mom had to stay at the hospital overnight, he explained gently. The doctors want to make sure the medicine is working. She sent me a message to say she's doing okay. Amy's lower lip trembled slightly. When can we see her? Soon, Tom promised. Maybe after school today. Speaking of which, where do you two go to school? Riverside Elementary, Alice answered. We're in Miss Peterson's class. Tom nodded, thinking quickly. That's not too far from Penny's school. Here's what we'll do. I'll make breakfast, then I need to stop by your apartment to pick up something for your mom. Then I'll drop all of you off at school. After work, I'll pick everyone up and we can visit your mom. How does that sound? The twins nodded solemnly, but Penny raised her hand as if she were in class. Dad, what about Mrs. Chen? She's expecting me after school. I'll call her while I make pancakes, Tom said, already mentally rearranging his day. It would be tight, but he could make it work. Breakfast was a livelier affair than usual in the Wilson household. The twins, initially quiet, warmed up over chocolate chip pancakes, Tom's specialty, reserved for special occasions or particularly hard days. He called Mrs. Chen, who immediately understood the situation. You're doing a good thing, Tom, she said warmly. Lisa would be proud. Those words stayed with him as he herded the three girls out the door, stopping first at Grace's apartment. Using her keys, he let himself in, feeling strange about entering her space without her there. The apartment was small but meticulously clean despite Grace's illness. Tom found the uniform exactly where she'd said it would be. As he was leaving, he noticed a stack of mail on the kitchen counter. Bills, mostly several marked past due in angry red letters. Beside them lay a calendar where Grace had carefully noted her work schedule and the girls' school activities. Several upcoming cleaning jobs were circled with question marks beside them. Tom didn't mean to pry, but he couldn't help seeing the careful notes about payment dates, each one calculated to stretch a limited income as far as possible. It was a system he recognized all too well. On impulse, he reached into his wallet and pulled out $60, most of what he had left until payday. He placed it under a fruit bowl on the counter, where Grace would find it but the girls wouldn't notice immediately. It wasn't much, but it might help with groceries or medicine copays. After dropping the girls at their respective schools with promises to pick them up at 3:30, Tom rushed to the factory, arriving just as his shift began. His supervisor raised an eyebrow at the hospital bag containing Grace's uniform. Everything okay, Wilson? Yes, sir, Tom replied. Just helping out a friend. The word friend felt strange on his tongue. He barely knew Grace or her daughters. Yet somehow in less than 24 hours they'd become important to him. During his lunch break, Tom called the hospital to check on Grace. To his relief, they connected him to her room. Tom? Her voice sounded raspy but stronger than the previous day. Are the girls okay? They're fine, he assured her. Had pancakes for breakfast and got to school on time. Penny's thrilled to have company. Thank you, Grace said, and he could hear the emotion in her voice. The doctor says I can probably go home tomorrow, but I need to rest for at least a week before going back to work. Tom heard the worry behind her words. A week without pay would be devastating for a single parent with no safety net. Don't worry about that right now, he said firmly. Just focus on getting better. The girls are fine, and everything else can be figured out later. After work, Tom collected the three girls from school. They chattered excitedly about their days, the twins seemingly less burdened now that they knew their mother was receiving care. At the hospital, they found Grace sitting up in bed, some color returned to her cheeks despite her obvious fatigue. Mom, the twins rushed to her bedside, careful of the IV line in her arm. My babies, Grace whispered, hugging them close. I missed you so much. Tom and Penny hung back, giving the family their moment. Grace looked up, meeting Tom's eyes over her daughters' heads. The gratitude in her gaze made him look away, suddenly embarrassed by the intensity of her emotion. Penny, he said quietly, should we go find the vending machines? Maybe get some snacks? His daughter nodded, understanding his need to give the family privacy. As they walked the hospital corridor, Penny slipped her hand into his. Dad? She asked thoughtfully. Are we going to keep helping them even after Miss Grace comes home? Tom considered the question carefully. Would you like to? Penny nodded. Alice and Amy told me they don't have many friends because they move a lot. And Miss Grace is nice. She reminds me a little of Mom. Tom squeezed his daughter's hand. She does, doesn't she? Strong and kind. So we'll keep helping them? Penny pressed. Tom thought about the bills on his own table, the ones on Grace's counter. He thought about the empty chair at their dinner table and the quiet of their apartment most evenings. He thought about the way Penny had laughed with the twins at breakfast, a sound he hadn't heard nearly enough lately. Yes, he said finally. We'll keep helping them. That's what friends do. When they returned with juice boxes and crackers, Grace was listening intently as the twins described their school day. She looked up as Tom and Penny entered. "Alice says you make magic pancakes," she said with a small smile. Tom laughed. "Not magic. Just chocolate chips and a secret ingredient. Love," Penny stage whispered to the twins. "That's always the secret ingredient." Later, as they prepared to leave, Grace asked Tom to stay behind for a moment. When the girls stepped into the hallway, she reached for his hand. "I found the money," she said quietly. "You shouldn't have done that," Tom shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "It's not much. It's everything," Grace corrected him. "But I can't keep accepting help without giving anything back. That's not who I am." "I understand," Tom said, recognizing her need for dignity. "Maybe when you're better we can figure something out. A trade of some kind. You're good at something I'm terrible at, I'm sure." Grace smiled. "I make amazing lasagna. And I can hem pants like a professional." "There you go," Tom said, returning her smile. "I burn everything that's not pancakes, and Penny's school pants are always too long." As he turned to leave, Grace called his name once more. "Tom, thank you for not looking away. Most people would have." Her words followed him down the hospital corridor, settling deep into a place in his heart that had been closed for a long time. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of new routines. Grace came home from the hospital with strict instructions to rest, take her antibiotics, and avoid work for at least 10 days. The doctor's orders were medically sound but financially impossible for a single mother with no paid sick leave. Tom found himself stepping into the gap without really planning to. The twins stayed with him and Penny during the day while Grace recovered. Each morning he'd drop all 3 girls at school, then head to his own job. Mrs. Chen, bless her heart, agreed to pick them up and watch them until Tom finished his shift. "Young man," she'd said when he tried to pay her extra for watching 2 more children, "some things are not about money. Your wife helped me when my Arthur was sick. Now I help you. That's how community works." Tom couldn't argue with her logic, though he made sure to bring her favorite tea and almond cookies whenever he could. Every evening, he'd take the girls to Grace's apartment, bringing dinner and staying to help with homework or household chores that Grace was still too weak to manage. The routine emerged naturally, without discussion or formal arrangement. It simply became what they did. By the 3rd weekend, Grace was strong enough to move around her apartment more freely, though she still tired easily. Tom arrived Saturday morning with all 3 girls and a bag of groceries. "We thought we'd make breakfast here for a change," he explained, as the girls rushed in to show Grace the library books they'd borrowed the day before. Grace looked better. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, and some fullness had returned to her face. She wore a simple blue dress instead of the bathrobe she'd lived in during the worst of her illness. "You didn't have to bring groceries," she protested, but with less conviction than before. They'd had this conversation several times, and Grace was gradually accepting that Tom's help came without expectations or judgment. Penny insisted on French toast. Tom replied with a shrug. Apparently, Alice and Amy have never had it. "She called it a breakfast emergency." Grace laughed, a sound that had become more frequent in recent days. "A breakfast emergency, huh? Well, we can't ignore that." They moved around the small kitchen together with an ease that surprised them both. Grace mixed the egg batter while Tom sliced bread. The girls set the table, arguing good-naturedly about who got to use the special cup with stars on it. "They're getting along so well," Grace observed quietly. "It's nice to see the twins making a friend. We've moved so often that they usually keep to themselves." Tom nodded, understanding. After Lisa died, Penny had withdrawn from many of her friendships, finding it hard to connect with kids whose lives seemed untouched by tragedy. Penny, too. She needed this. As they ate, Amy asked the question that had been coming for days. "Mr. Tom, are you going to keep visiting us when Mom goes back to work?" The adults exchanged glances. They hadn't discussed what would happen once Grace fully recovered. The temporary arrangement had taken on a life of its own, but neither had put words to what might come next. "Well," Tom began carefully, "that depends on whether you all want us to keep visiting." "Yes," the twins exclaimed in unison. "Obviously," added Penny, as if the answer couldn't be more clear. Grace smiled at their enthusiasm. "I think that's a yes, and—" She hesitated, then continued more firmly. "I'd like that too, but things need to change. I can't keep accepting help without giving back. Tom started to protest, but Grace raised her hand. I'm serious, Tom. My mother raised me to believe that pride is sometimes all we have, but it shouldn't stand in the way of community. You've helped us through this rough patch, and I'm grateful, but now I need to find a way to contribute. Tom respected her too much to argue. What are you thinking? Grace took a deep breath. I'm going back to work Monday. Not full schedule yet. Mrs. Baker agreed to ease me back in with just one building this week. But I was wondering if we could work out a trade of sorts. What kind of trade? Tom asked, curious. You and Penny have dinner with us twice a week, and I'll cook. Real meals, not just soup from cartons. Grace smiled. And on weekends, maybe I could watch Penny sometimes when you need a break or have errands. Give Mrs. Chen a rest. Tom considered her proposal. The truth was, he'd been dreading the end of their makeshift arrangement. The past few weeks had brought a warmth back to his and Penny's life that had been missing since Lisa died. The apartment felt less empty, the evenings less lonely. I think that sounds fair, he agreed. But I have conditions too. Grace raised an eyebrow. Oh? Let me drive you to work and back, at least for the first week. The doctor said not to overdo it. Grace started to object, then seemed to think better of it. Okay, that's reasonable. And, Tom continued, we host dinner sometimes too. My cooking skills are limited, but I can manage spaghetti. Grace laughed. Deal, though I reserve the right to teach you a few more recipes. Dad needs help, Penny chimed in seriously. He burned the mac and cheese last week. The whole pot turned black. Traitor, Tom whispered to his daughter, who giggled. After breakfast, while the girls played in the living room, Tom helped Grace sort through a pile of mail she'd been avoiding. Most were bills, many with second or final notices stamped across them. Grace's face grew more pinched with each envelope they opened. It's not as bad as it looks, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Once I'm back to full hours, I can start catching up. Tom recognized the math she was doing in her head, the same calculations he made each month, trying to stretch his paycheck to cover everything. What about the girl's father? Does he help at all? Grace's expression hardened slightly. Joe left when they were 3. Last I heard, he was in Arizona with his new family. No child support in over 2 years. Tom nodded, not pushing further. His own financial situation was far from stable, but at least he didn't have the added burden of a partner who'd abandoned his responsibilities. Listen, he said carefully. I know a guy at the factory who's good with budgets. Pete in accounting. He helped me set up a payment plan with the electric company last year. Maybe he could look at your bills, see if there are options. Grace was quiet for a moment, her pride visibly wrestling with practicality. Finally, she nodded. That would be helpful. Thank you. The following week established their new normal. Tom drove Grace to her cleaning job, then picked her up afterward. The girls continued their growing friendship, trading books and secrets with equal enthusiasm. Grace cooked dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays, real, homemade meals that made Tom realize how much he and Penny had been surviving on quick convenience foods. This is amazing, he said one evening, savoring a bite of Grace's chicken pot pie. Where did you learn to cook like this? Grace smiled, pleased by his appreciation. My grandmother. She believed anyone could be rich in the things that matter. Good food, clean home, kind heart. Wise woman, Tom said. He looked around the table at the 3 girls chattering about a school project, at Grace's relaxed smile, at the simple but delicious food. For the first time in a long time, he felt something close to contentment. On Saturday, Grace kept her promise to watch Penny while Tom took on an extra half shift at the factory. When he picked his daughter up, he found all 3 girls with flour-streaked faces. We made cookies, Penny announced proudly, presenting him with a slightly lopsided chocolate chip cookie. Miss Grace showed us how to crack eggs without getting shells everywhere. A valuable life skill, Tom agreed solemnly. Accepting the cookie, Grace appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Hope you don't mind the baking lesson. They were very enthusiastic students. Not at all, Tom said, biting into the cookie. This is fantastic. Dad, Penny said suddenly, Miss Grace has a sewing machine. She can fix my school pants that are too long. Can she, please? Tom looked at Grace, who shrugged. Happy to. It would only take a few minutes. If you're sure it's not too much trouble, Tom said. It's no trouble, Grace insisted. Like I said, we need balance in this friendship. You help us, we help you. The word friendship hung in the air between them. Is that what they had developed? Tom realized that yes, somewhere amid the shared meals and school pickups and everyday small kindnesses, they had indeed become friends. As October turned to November, their lives became more intertwined. Pete from accounting helped Grace set up payment plans for her most pressing bills. Tom fixed the leaky faucet in her bathroom. Grace hemmed Penny's school pants and taught Tom how to make a decent stir-fry. One crisp Sunday afternoon, Tom took all three girls to the park. While they played on the swings, he sat on a bench enjoying the rare moment of quiet. A woman walking by smiled at him. "Your daughters are adorable," she commented. "The twins look just like you." Tom opened his mouth to correct her, then hesitated. From a distance, he supposed Alice and Amy could pass for his children, with their dark hair not so different from his own. Before he could formulate a response, the woman had continued on her way. That evening, as they all sat in Grace's living room, the girls building a fort from blankets while the adults folded laundry, Tom mentioned the incident. "Someone at the park thought Alice and Amy were mine," he said with a small laugh. "Said they looked like me." Grace's hand stilled on the towel she was folding. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing," Tom admitted. "She walked away before I could explain." Grace nodded, resuming her folding. After a moment, she said quietly, "People make assumptions. Single dad, single mom, three girls who get along like sisters. I suppose from the outside we might look like a ready-made family." The word family hung between them, heavier than friendship had been weeks earlier. Tom felt his heart beat a little faster. Would that be so strange? He asked, surprising himself with his boldness. Grace looked up, meeting his eyes. "No," she said simply. "Not strange at all." From the living room floor, surrounded by blankets and pillows, Penny called out, "Dad! Miss Grace! You have to come see our fort. We made room for everyone." Tom stood, offering his hand to help Grace up. She took it, her fingers warm against his. Neither let go immediately. "Should we check out this amazing fort?" Tom asked. Grace smiled, something new and tentative in her expression. "Lead the way." As they crossed the room to where the girls waited impatiently, Tom realized that in helping Grace's family, he had found a way to help his own as well. The empty spaces in their lives, the missing pieces that grief had left behind, were slowly being filled with new connections, new possibilities, new hope. 6 months had passed since that fateful evening at the bakery. Outside, the trees had cycled through their seasons. The crisp fall leaves had given way to winter bareness, then spring buds, and now lush summer greenery shaded the streets. But the most significant changes had happened inside the hearts and homes of two families that had become, in many ways, one. Tom stood in Grace's kitchen, stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce while she checked the garlic bread in the oven. Through the window, they could see all three girls in the small community garden behind the apartment building, where they had planted tomatoes and herbs in a little plot the building manager had assigned them. "They're watering everything except the actual plants," Grace observed with a laugh. Penny was directing the twins in their gardening efforts, taking her role as the oldest very seriously. "At least they're enthusiastic," Tom replied, smiling as Amy accidentally sprayed Alice with the hose, resulting in squeals and laughter. Grace moved beside him, checking the sauce. Her shoulder brushed his, a casual contact that had become comfortably familiar over the months. "Needs more oregano," she decided, reaching past him for the spice rack they had installed together. Tom watched her as she sprinkled the herb into the pot. Grace had flourished in recent months. With her health restored, she had not only returned to her cleaning jobs but had also taken on a weekend position at a local coffee shop, which offered better pay and more regular hours. The constant worry that had lined her face when they first met had softened, though she remained as practical and determined as ever. "What?" she asked, noticing his gaze. "Just thinking about how much has changed since we met," Tom replied honestly. Grace's expression softened. "Remember when I refused to let you pay for bread for the girls?" "You were protecting your pride," Tom said. "I understood that." "Pride doesn't keep the lights on or fill empty stomachs," Grace replied, stirring the sauce. "But it's taken me a long time to learn the difference between accepting help and being helpless. You taught me that. We taught each other," Tom corrected gently. So much of their relationship had been built on this balance, giving and receiving, supporting and being supported. Neither led and neither followed. They walked side by side. The back door burst open as the girls tumbled in, breathless and damp from their gardening adventures. Dad, Miss Grace, Penny announced. We checked the tomatoes and they'll be ready next week, we think. Just in time for the 4th of July cookout, Tom said, ruffling his daughter's hair. Alice tugged at Grace's sleeve. Mom, can we invite Mrs. Chen to the cookout too? She's been teaching us Chinese characters and we want to show her how much we've learned. Of course, Grace replied. The more the merrier. Amy, always the more observant of the twins, looked between the adults with narrowed eyes. You two are acting weird again. Weird how? Tom asked, exchanging an amused glance with Grace. Like you have a secret, Amy declared confidently. Tom raised an eyebrow at Grace, who nodded slightly. They had in fact been waiting for the right moment to share some news with the girls. Everyone wash up for dinner, Grace said. Then yes, we have something to tell you. The girls raced to the bathroom, their curiosity evidently overcoming any desire to delay. Are you sure about this? Tom asked quietly when they were alone. We can wait if you think it's too soon. Grace took his hand, squeezing it gently. It's been 6 months, Tom. The girls already consider each other family. We practically live in each other's apartments. I think it's time. Tom nodded, feeling a mix of nervousness and certainty. The sauce could simmer a few more minutes. When the girls returned, hands still damp but clean, they sat at the table with expectant faces. So what's the big secret? Penny asked, unable to contain herself. Tom looked at Grace, who gave him an encouraging nod. Well, he began, you know how we've been spending a lot of time together these past months. Every day, Amy interjected matter-of-factly. Yes, every day, Tom agreed with a smile. And it's been wonderful. Grace and I have been talking, and we've decided that instead of going back and forth between 2 apartments, it might make more sense for all of us to live together. 3 pairs of eyes widened in unison. You mean, like a real family? Alice asked cautiously, as if afraid to hope. Grace reached out, taking her daughter's hand. We already are a real family in all the ways that matter. This would just make it official. So we'd be like sisters? For real? Penny asked, looking between Alice and Amy. Not by blood, Tom explained, but yes, in every other way. Where would we live? Practical Amy wanted to know. Our apartment is too small for everyone. And so is ours, Tom acknowledged. We've found a house to rent. It's not fancy, but it has 4 bedrooms and a real yard for gardening. 4 bedrooms? Alice counted on her fingers. 1 for you and Miss Grace, 1 for each of us? The adults exchanged glances again. They hadn't quite gotten to the next part of their news. Actually, Grace said carefully, Tom and I would have separate rooms, at least for now. The girls looked confused. But aren't you getting married? Amy asked bluntly. That's what happens in the books we read. When people decide to live together, they get married. Tom felt his cheeks warm slightly. Life isn't always like books, Amy. Grace and I care about each other very much, but we're not rushing anything. We're going to be a family together, but we're taking things 1 step at a time. It's important to us that we do this right, Grace added. We've both been through hard times before. We want to make sure this works for everyone. The girls absorbed this information, looking at each other as if having a silent conversation. Finally, Penny spoke up. So it's like a trial run? To see if everyone gets along living together? Tom couldn't help but laugh. Something like that, though we already know we get along pretty well. When would we move? Alice asked. The house is available next month, Grace answered. We'd have time to pack everything carefully and decide what we want to bring to the new place. And we can paint our rooms whatever color we want. Amy's eyes brightened at the possibility. Within reason, Grace cautioned with a smile. No pure black or neon colors that will give us headaches. The girls immediately launched into an animated discussion about room colors, bed arrangements, and who would get the room closest to the bathroom. Their immediate acceptance of the plan brought a lump to Tom's throat. Children, he'd learned, often understood the heart of matters better than adults with all their complications and hesitations. As they served dinner, the conversation continued to flow around possible arrangements for the new house. Tom noticed that Grace seemed quieter than usual, a small furrow between her brows. Everything okay? He asked softly when the girls became engrossed in planning a welcome party for the new house. Grace met his eyes. I was just thinking about where we were a year ago. Me working 3 jobs and still falling behind. The girls wearing hand-me-downs that were already too small. No one to call when I got sick. She shook her head slowly. If someone had told me then that we'd be here now, Planning to move in with a man who bought bread for my hungry children? I would have said they were crazy. Life can change in an instant, Tom agreed, thinking of how quickly his own had been upended when Lisa was diagnosed. Sometimes for worse, but sometimes... He looked around the table at the chattering girls. Sometimes for better. After dinner, while Grace helped the twins with their summer reading, Tom and Penny cleaned up the kitchen. As they worked side by side, Tom loading the dishwasher while Penny wiped the counters, his daughter grew uncharacteristically quiet. "Penny, what's on your mind, kiddo?" he asked. She focused intently on a spot on the counter before looking up at him. "Dad, do you think Mom would be okay with this? With us living with Miss Grace and the twins?" The question caught Tom off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Penny had been only 8 when Lisa died, but she remembered her mother clearly, and often wondered aloud what Lisa would think about various developments in their lives. Tom set down the plate he was rinsing and crouched beside his daughter, meeting her eyes. "I think your mom would be very happy knowing that we found people who care about us, and who we care about in return. She always wanted us to be happy even if she couldn't be here with us." Penny considered this. "Miss Grace isn't trying to replace Mom." "No, she's not," Tom agreed. "No one could ever replace your mom. Grace knows that, and she respects the special place your mother will always have in our hearts." "I like Miss Grace," Penny confessed, as if admitting a secret. "She reminds me of Mom sometimes, like when she checks my homework or brushes my hair. But in a different way, too." "That's okay," Tom assured her. "It's possible to love people in different ways. Your love for your mom will never go away, and there's still plenty of room in your heart for Grace and the twins." Penny nodded, seemingly satisfied. "I think Mom would like Miss Grace. They both make really good cookies." Tom laughed softly, blinking back unexpected tears. "Yes, they do." Later that evening, after the girls had finally gone to bed, their excitement about the new house making bedtime a more prolonged process than usual, Tom and Grace sat on the small balcony of her apartment. The summer night was warm, fireflies blinking in the community garden below. They sat in comfortable silence, shoulders touching, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "They took it well," Grace said eventually. "Better than I expected," Tom agreed, "though I'm a little concerned about Amy's plans for a rainbow galaxy bedroom." "That sounds like a painting nightmare," Grace laughed. "We'll negotiate. Maybe 1 rainbow wall instead of 4. They fell silent again. The sounds of the neighborhood, distant music, a dog barking, the occasional car passing, creating a familiar backdrop to their thoughts. "Are we crazy for doing this?" Grace asked suddenly. "Moving in together after knowing each other such a short time?" Tom considered the question. "Maybe by some standards, but I feel like we've lived through more together in 6 months than some people experience in years. I know you, Grace, your strengths, your struggles, your dreams for the girls. And you know me probably better than anyone except maybe Penny." Grace nodded slowly. "When Joe left, I swore I'd never depend on anyone again. I was so determined to prove I could do it all alone." "And you could," Tom said sincerely. "You're the strongest person I know. But just because you can do something alone doesn't mean you should have to." "That works both ways," Grace pointed out. "You've been carrying everything by yourself since Lisa died. It's okay to share the load." Tom reached for her hand in the darkness, their fingers intertwining naturally, comfortably. "That's what we're good at, isn't it? Helping each other carry the hard things." Grace rested her head against his shoulder. "The girls asked if we're getting married." "They did," Tom acknowledged, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "And someday, we might," Grace continued carefully. "But I'm glad we're doing it this way first, building a foundation. Creating a family," Tom said, echoing the phrase that had come to mean so much to both of them. "We already have," Grace replied softly. "That happened the moment you decided not to walk past hungry children at a bakery counter." Tom thought about the chain of events that had led them here, from that chance encounter to this moment of quiet intimacy under the stars. How close he had come to simply paying for his own bread and leaving, never knowing what he would be missing. "What was it you called it? The unthinkable?" Grace asked, remembering the phrase he'd used once to describe his decision to help strangers. "Not so unthinkable after all," Tom said. "Just human kindness, the willingness to see someone else's struggle and not look away. It changed everything," Grace murmured. Tom looked up at the stars, then down at their joined hands, then toward the apartment where 3 girls slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved, that they belonged, that they were family. Yes, he agreed, his heart full of quiet certainty. It did.